Look, I'll speak slowly so you can keep up. Beatrice Wyndham leaned back in the leather banquette, the midday sun highlighting her platinum hair and red designer dress as she addressed the black waitress with theatrical patience. My family has been dining at fine establishments since before you were born, so when I tell you the salmon is overcooked, I'm not asking for your opinion. Her husband nodded approvingly while adjusting his orange polo shirt. Charles here graduated from Wharton, she continued, gesturing to her son in his green button-down. He understands quality service, unlike some people who probably never finished high school. The woman's laugh was sharp and calculating. Maybe this job will teach you some life skills before you end up on welfare like the rest of your kind. Cleo Navarro maintained her professional smile in her black dress shirt and slacks, balancing the untouched plates on her arm, while none of them realized they were insulting the woman who would inherit their favorite restaurant. Welcome to Frost Folk Tales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. Inside the elegant Navarros, everything became markedly delineated under fluorescent lighting as lunch hour commenced at the upscale restaurant. The glow of the overhead lights caught the crystal glasses and the smooth surface of the floor-to-ceiling glass window, creating a perfect setting for an unforgettable clash. Cleo Navarro maintained a calm composure as she stood beside table 12, her dark eyes glittering, despite the fact that 3 of the most entitled customers she had ever encountered in 6 months, working incognito at her father's establishment, were throwing venom her way. My apologies, Mrs. Wyndham, for your dissatisfaction with the salmon. Cleo's voice was consistent and professional. I would be glad to get the kitchen to prepare you a replacement. A cruel smile spread across Beatrice Wyndham's red lips. Oh, how gracious of you to do what should have been done right the first time. She looked at her husband Richard, who wore an orange polo shirt that slightly hugged his bulk. Sweetheart, isn't it ironic how they always act like they're doing us a favor when they fix their own mess? Richard Wyndham laughed, and his voice echoed through the room. Of course, sweetheart. I guess we shouldn't expect anything better. He waved Cleo away. These people don't tend to be very detail-oriented. Charles Wyndham looked up from his phone, his green button-down shirt impeccably pressed, his expression matching his mother's disdain. Mom, you're being too kind. This is probably the best job she'll ever have. We're basically providing a public service by giving her employment. The words hit like physical blows. But Cleo's expression didn't waver. She'd learned to maintain composure under pressure during her Harvard MBA program, though none of those professors had prepared her for this particular challenge. Let me take these plates back to the kitchen, and we'll get you a fresh salmon immediately. Beatrice's laugh was like breaking glass. Fresh salmon. Listen to her trying to sound educated. She examined her manicured nails with theatrical boredom. Tell me, dear, what's the furthest you've been in school? Community college? GED program? Or did you skip straight to learning how to carry plates? Across the dining room, Raymond Jackson paused in his wine service, his experienced eyes taking in the scene with growing concern. In his 15 years at Navarro's, he'd witnessed his share of discrimination, but this felt different, more calculated, more cruel. The black server adjusted his black dress shirt and continued watching, ready to intervene if necessary. At the hostess station, Natalia Vega was uneasy with her fingers, clutching the reservation book during the tirade. A Latina employee of Navarro's for 3 years, the young woman had never witnessed a customer displaying such open contempt for a staff member. She looked at the kitchen, wondering to tell the manager or not. Cleo placed the plates down on the service tray carefully and deliberately. Thank you for being so patient as we sort out your meal. Though nobody else could hear them, the words were roaring in her head. Every instinct told her to say who she was and enjoy the sight of their faces falling when they realized they were scolding the daughter of the owner. Yet her resolve to learn every practical aspect of the business and understand everything about the business kept her identity hidden for months. "Oh, you appreciate our patience." Beatrice's voice dripped with mock gratitude. "How absolutely precious." "Richard, she's appreciating our patience while we sit here hungry because she can't do her job properly." "Maybe we should speak to the manager," Charles suggested, his tone suggesting he was doing them all a tremendous favor. "Someone needs to know that their staff lacks basic competency." The other diners were beginning to notice now. Conversations quieted at nearby tables as the Wyndham family's voices carried across the elegantly appointed dining room. An elderly couple sharing pasta looked disturbed by the escalating confrontation. A business lunch at table 6 had paused mid-negotiation to watch the drama unfold. Beatrice seemed to feed off the attention, her voice growing louder and more theatrical. "You know what the problem is?" She addressed her family but spoke loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Nobody teaches personal responsibility anymore. These people think the world owes them something instead of earning their place through hard work and dedication." "Like we did," Richard added, puffing up with self-importance in his orange polo. "My family built their wealth over generations. We understand the value of excellence." Cleo's hands remained steady as she organized the plates, but her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The irony was staggering. Her father, Miguel, had started as a busboy at 17, working double shifts while learning English and studying business principles. He'd saved every penny for 15 years before opening his first restaurant. The Wyndhams had no idea they were sitting in the monument to everything they claimed she couldn't understand. "I'll have your replacement meal prepared immediately," Cleo said, lifting the tray with practiced ease. "Is there anything specific you'd like the chef to know about the preparation?" Beatrice waved her hand dismissively. "Just tell them to cook it properly this time. And maybe next time you'll pay attention instead of probably daydreaming about whatever it is your kind thinks about." The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Raymond Jackson's grip tightened on the wine bottle he was holding. Natalia Vega actually stepped forward from the hostess station before catching herself. Even some of the other diners looked genuinely shocked at the blatant racism. Charles chuckled at what his mother said. "I'm sure she wonders how she'll manage to pay rent after she gets fired from jobs like this." "This is something I don't get," Beatrice went on, clearly enjoying her audience. "Why do restaurants employ individuals who clearly do not care about quality?" She stared at Cleo openly with contempt. "Just look on her face. It appears unlikely that she has a place here." The question was rhetorical and vicious, designed to humiliate and diminish. Other customers were now openly staring, some with horror at the family's behavior, others with curious fascination at the unfolding drama. The natural skylight streaming through the windows seemed to spotlight the confrontation, making it impossible to ignore. Cleo felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant, the pressure to maintain her cover story, warring with her desire to defend herself and her dignity. She thought about her father, probably reviewing inventory at his second location across town, trusting her to handle whatever challenges arose. She thought about her business plan for expanding the restaurant group, her vision for creating a workplace culture of respect and excellence. Beatrice, in her red dress practically glowing in the fluorescent light, muttered, "I think we should speak to management. We hope someone will notice that the hiring choices made are affecting the standards of this place." Richard nodded like an enlightened scholar. A restaurant is only as good as its weakest link, and obviously he signatically dissed Cleo, as there are some pretty weak links in the chain. The threat was clear now. They weren't just content to humiliate her personally, they wanted to damage her professionally, potentially costing her the job they assumed she desperately needed. The calculating cruelty of it was breathtaking. "I'll be happy to get the manager for you after I've taken care of your meal," Cleo replied, her voice steady despite the emotional storm raging inside her. "Oh no," Charles said, pulling out his phone with renewed interest. "I think we need to document this properly." He began typing rapidly. "My social media followers love hearing about customer service disasters. This could go viral." The modern threat of digital humiliation added another layer to their assault. Not content with in-person degradation, they wanted to broadcast her supposed failures to the world. The fluorescent lighting seemed to intensify, casting sharp shadows across their faces as they plotted her professional destruction. Beatrice smiled with genuine pleasure. "Excellent idea, darling. Make sure you capture how unprofessional and defensive she is. People need to know what kind of service they can expect when these people are hired for jobs they're not qualified to handle." Raymond Jackson had seen enough. He began moving across the dining room, his path intercept course with table 12. Natalia Vega reached for the phone to call the manager's office upstairs. Other staff members had begun to notice the commotion, sensing the shift in the restaurant's atmosphere. Cleo gave one of her hands a slight shake to make this understatement, but Raymond was the only one who saw it. He halted as he realized she had something that made him step back. She was the one who'd make it all happen there. The Wyndham family did not realize that they just made the biggest error of their privileged lives. While they were comfortably seated in their designer attire under bright restaurant lighting, they conspired to destroy a person they believed was powerless. Little did they know this was in actuality the person who could render them permanently banned from the premises. Despite the crowd of people around them, Table 12 had become something more than a customer complaint. It had turned into a settlement. The burgundy wine spreads across the pristine white tablecloth like spilled blood, and Beatrice Wyndham's satisfied smile tells Cleo everything she needs to know about whether this was an accident. "Oh my goodness," Beatrice announces loudly, her voice carrying across the dining room under the bright fluorescent lights and natural skylight streaming through the tall windows. "Look what you made me do with your clumsy service. This wine costs more than you probably make in a week." Cleo feels her jaw clench as she watches the expensive liquid seep into the fabric, but she maintains her professional composure. Around them, other diners begin to turn their heads, drawn by Beatrice's deliberately raised voice echoing through the upscale establishment. "I'm so sorry about that," Cleo says evenly, reaching for her cleaning cloth. "Let me get that cleaned up for you right away." "Oh, you're sorry?" Charles Wyndham leans back in his green button-down shirt, his voice dripping with condescension. "That's rich. I bet you're one of those affirmative action hires, right? Probably got your job through some diversity program instead of actual qualifications." His comment cuts through the ambient restaurant noise, causing several nearby tables to pause their conversations. The overhead lighting illuminates every detail of his smug expression as he continues his verbal assault. "Charles, take a picture of this mess." Richard Wyndham chuckles from across the table, his orange polo shirt wrinkled from leaning forward to get a better view. "I want to document this for our social media. Our followers love seeing incompetent service workers get put in their place." Cleo's hands move methodically as she blots the wine, but her mind races with thoughts that would shock these people into silence. If they only knew that the woman they're humiliating holds a Harvard MBA, that she's analyzed profit margins and operational efficiency that would make their trust fund portfolios look like child's allowance money. She thinks of her father, Miguel Navarro, who started as a busboy in a restaurant not unlike this one 30 years ago. He'd told her stories of customers who treated him like he was invisible, who spoke over him and around him as if he weren't human. Those experiences had shaped his determination to create something better, to build an establishment where dignity wasn't determined by your position on the organizational chart. "You know what I think?" Beatrice's red dress seems to glow under the restaurant's lighting as she leans forward, her voice taking on a more vicious edge. "I think you people get these jobs and then think you're entitled to attitude. You probably think you're too good for this work, don't you? The words "you people" hang in the air like a toxic cloud, and Cleo sees several diners at neighboring tables shift uncomfortably. She continues cleaning, but her internal monologue burns with responses she can't voice. Too good for this work? She's working every position in this restaurant specifically because she understands that leadership means knowing every aspect of the operation. She's cleaned bathrooms, prepped vegetables, balanced registers, and yes, served entitled customers who mistake cruelty for power. "Ma'am, if you'd like, I can get you a fresh tablecloth," Cleo offers, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her chest. "A fresh tablecloth?" Charles laughs loudly, pulling out his phone to capture the scene. "How about some fresh competence? Maybe they should hire people who actually belong in civilized establishments instead of charity cases who clearly don't understand proper service." Through the service window that connects the dining room to the kitchen, Isabella Moreno pauses in her food preparation. She's known the Navarro family for 15 years, watched Cleo grow from a determined teenager shadowing her father during summer breaks to a brilliant young woman with business acumen that impressed even the most seasoned restaurant consultants. Seeing her endure this abuse makes Isabella's chef's knife grip tighten with barely contained anger. "Look at her," Beatrice continues, her voice growing louder and more theatrical. "Standing there like she doesn't understand what we're saying. I bet she barely finished high school, probably has children with different fathers, living off government assistance when she's not pretending to work here." Each assumption is so wildly wrong that Cleo almost laughs. Harvard Business School's Dean's List, fluent in 3 languages, a thesis on sustainable business practices in the hospitality industry that her professors suggested she publish. But she holds her tongue, knowing that revealing any of this would compromise the very mission that brought her here. Her father had insisted she understand the business from every angle before taking over. "Miga," he'd said, "you can read about leadership in books, but you can't learn empathy from a textbook. Work beside our people. Understand what they face every day. Only then will you be ready to lead them." Raymond Jackson, the experienced server working the section across the dining room, notices the commotion and begins moving toward the table. His black dress shirt and slacks mirror Cleo's uniform, but his 20 years in fine dining have taught him to recognize trouble before it explodes. He's witnessed this pattern before: wealthy customers who mistake their economic privilege for permission to dehumanize working people. "Everything all right over here?" Raymond approaches with the smooth professionalism that comes from decades of experience. But Cleo catches his eye and gives the slightest shake of her head. She appreciates his solidarity, but this is something she needs to navigate alone. "Oh, perfect." Richard Wyndham grins, adjusting his phone's camera angle. "Now we have 2 of them. This is going to be great content. My followers eat up these authentic interactions with service workers." Authentic interactions. The phrase makes Cleo's stomach turn. These people are treating human beings like entertainment, turning someone's workplace struggle into social media content for their privileged friends' amusement. "You know what your problem is." Beatrice's red dress shifts as she stands slightly, using her height to intimidate. "You think you deserve respect just for showing up. But respect is earned, and frankly, I don't see anything here worth respecting. Look at you, probably spent your whole life making excuses instead of improving yourself." The irony is staggering. Cleo has spent the last 6 months working 16-hour days, learning every aspect of restaurant operations, from inventory management to staff scheduling. She's memorized food costs, analyzed customer flow patterns, and developed efficiency improvements that have already increased staff tips by 12%. But she can't defend herself without revealing her identity. "I just want to do my job and serve you well," Cleo responds, her voice controlled but firm. "Can I get you anything else while I finish cleaning this up?" "What you can get me," Charles interjects, his voice loud enough to ensure half the dining room can hear, "is someone who actually knows what they're doing. someone who didn't get their position through diversity quotas or whatever social justice program this restaurant apparently participates in. Natalia Vega, at the hostess stand, grips her reservation book tighter, watching the scene unfold under the bright overhead lighting. She's worked here for 3 years, has seen Miguel Navarro treat every employee with dignity and respect, regardless of their position. Watching his daughter endure this abuse while maintaining perfect professionalism fills her with admiration and fury in equal measure. You're probably wondering why we're being so direct with you, Beatrice continues, her red dress catching the light as she gestures dramatically. It's because someone needs to teach you people about consequences. You can't just coast through life expecting handouts and participation trophies. Handouts. If Beatrice Wyndham only knew that the woman she's lecturing has already identified 3 operational improvements that will save the restaurant $40,000 annually, that the uneducated charity case she's berating graduated summa cum laude from one of the world's most prestigious business programs. Ma'am, I understand you're frustrated, Cleo says carefully, but I'm doing my best to provide you with excellent service. Your best? Richard laughs, holding up his phone to capture her response. Honey, if this is your best, I hate to see your worst. Maybe you should consider a career more suited to your skill level. I hear they're always hiring at fast food places. The comment draws uncomfortable glances from other tables. But Charles seems energized by the attention. That's actually good advice, Dad. Sometimes people need honest feedback about their limitations. Not everyone is cut out for upscale dining establishments. Isabella Moreno can't take any more. She moves closer to the service window, her chef's coat bright white under the kitchen's fluorescent lighting. She's watched Cleo master complex financial models and operational theories that would overwhelm most business school graduates. Seeing her reduced to this is unbearable. But Cleo catches Isabella's eye through the service window and gives another subtle signal. Not yet. She needs to see how far this will go, needs to understand the full scope of what her future employees face when she's not here to witness it. Let me guess. Beatrice's voice takes on a mock sympathetic tone. You probably think this job is temporary, right? You probably think you're going somewhere better, that this is just a stepping stone to bigger things. But sweetie, this is it for people like you. This is as good as it gets. People like you. The phrase echoes in Cleo's mind as she finishes cleaning the spilled wine. Her movements precise and professional, despite the verbal assault. If only Beatrice knew that the woman she's dismissing will soon control every aspect of this establishment, that her assumptions about race, class, and capability are about to be shattered in the most spectacular way possible. The burgundy stain is gone, but the real mess these people have made is just beginning to reveal itself. Beatrice Wyndham's perfectly manicured fingers danced across her phone screen with predatory precision, her red designer dress catching the natural light streaming through the restaurant's skylights. The contrast was stark. The bright, airy dining room filled with the gentle hum of civilized conversation, while darkness seemed to emanate from her corner table like a spreading stain. Charles, darling, look at this, she announced to her son, her voice dripping with malicious satisfaction. I've found their social media accounts. Perfect. Charles Wyndham looked up from his green button-down shirt, adjusting it smugly as he leaned closer to his mother's phone. Oh, this is going to be good. What are you thinking? Beatrice's eyes gleamed as she began typing, her thumbs moving with the efficiency of someone well-versed in digital destruction. I'm crafting the most deliciously scathing review. Listen to this. She cleared her throat theatrically, ensuring her voice carried across the dining room where other patrons were beginning to take notice. Absolutely appalling service at what was once a respectable establishment, she read aloud, her voice growing stronger with each word. Our waitress, a hostile and incompetent young woman, clearly lacks the basic education and training necessary for even the simplest tasks. Cleo Navarro stood frozen near their table, her black dress shirt and slacks pristine despite the chaos of lunch service. The fluorescent lights overhead illuminated every micro-expression that crossed her face, the slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible clench of her jaw. She had faced boardroom presentations at Harvard, defended complex business strategies to seasoned executives, but this moment felt more challenging than any academic or professional hurdle she had ever encountered. "Mother, you should definitely tag the Pemberton family," Charles suggested with growing excitement. "And the country club board. Oh, and don't forget the hospital auxiliary committee. They eat here monthly." Richard Wyndham, comfortable in his orange polo shirt, chuckled from across the table. "Make sure you mention how she probably got this job through some diversity program. People need to know what they're dealing with when they come here." Beatrice's fingers flew across the screen as she incorporated her family's suggestions. "Perfect additions, both of you. I'm also tagging several food bloggers I know personally. This place needs to understand there are consequences for hiring unsuitable staff." The natural skylight above cast geometric patterns across the polished floor, but the warmth of the sunlight seemed unable to penetrate the growing chill that emanated from the Wyndham table. Other diners began turning in their seats, some discreetly holding up their phones to capture the unfolding drama. At a table near the windows, an elderly couple whispered urgently to each other. "Are they really writing a review while sitting right in front of that poor girl?" the woman asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Shh," her husband cautioned. But his eyes remained fixed on the scene with horrified fascination. Across the dining room, Natalia Vega gripped her hostess station radio with white knuckles. She pressed the button and whispered urgently, "Arthur, we need you downstairs immediately. We have a situation with the Wyndham party." Static crackled back. "I'm in the middle of setting up the Morrison private event upstairs." "What kind of situation?" Natalia glanced toward Cleo's table, watching as Beatrice continued her public humiliation campaign. "The kind that's about to explode across social media. Please, Arthur, Cleo needs backup." "Give me 10 minutes, came the harried response. "Handle it best you can until then." 10 minutes felt like an eternity as Natalia watched helplessly from her post. She couldn't abandon the hostess station during peak lunch hours, but every instinct screamed at her to intervene. Beatrice held her phone higher, ensuring maximum visibility as she continued reading her review aloud. The staff member in question displayed shocking attitude problems and clear resentment toward customers who expect basic standards of service. One can only wonder about the establishment's hiring practices and whether proper background checks were conducted. The cruelty was calculated, each word chosen for maximum damage. Several diners had now pulled out their phones, some clearly recording the incident, while others appeared to be researching the restaurant's social media accounts themselves. "Charles," Beatrice continued without missing a beat, "you should absolutely post this on your business school alumni network. Weren't you just telling me how many of your classmates work in the hospitality industry now?" Charles grinned, pulling out his own phone. "Brilliant idea. The Columbia Business School network has over 15,000 members. I'll cross-post to LinkedIn too. This could easily reach 50,000 people by tomorrow." Cleo felt something cold settle in her stomach as she realized the scope of their intended destruction. This wasn't just about humiliating her in the moment. They were attempting to inflict lasting professional damage on both her and her father's restaurant. Every fiber of her business training told her to reveal herself immediately, to stop this escalation before it spiraled beyond control. But another part of her, the part that had committed to understanding every aspect of the business from the ground up, recognized this as perhaps the most crucial lesson of all. How many of her future employees would face similar situations without the safety net of family ownership? How would they navigate this kind of systematic harassment? From the kitchen doorway, Isabella Moreno watched with growing alarm. She had known Cleo since she was a little girl, had watched her grow from a curious child asking questions about recipe measurements to a brilliant young woman with degrees that would make any parent proud. Seeing her now, standing with quiet dignity while enduring this assault, made Isabella's chest tight with protective anger. Isabella took a step forward, then stopped. She understood Cleo's mission, respected her commitment to experiencing every role authentically. But watching someone you loved being torn apart in public required superhuman restraint. "Now," Beatrice announced, her voice taking on an even more sinister tone, "I think our little waitress here needs to understand the gravity of her situation." She stood up from her chair, her red dress making her look like a predatory bird, as she positioned herself directly in front of Cleo. The natural light streaming through the windows seemed to create a spotlight effect, ensuring that every person in the dining room could witness what was about to unfold. "Look around you, dear," Beatrice said, gesturing broadly at the restaurant filled with well-dressed patrons. "Do you see all these people? They represent the kind of clientele that keeps establishments like this in business. And right now, thanks to your attitude and incompetence, they're all witnessing exactly why you're unsuitable for even this menial position." Cleo's hands remained steady at her sides, but Isabella could see the storm building behind her eyes. 25 years of friendship with Miguel had taught Isabella to recognize the Navarro family's particular brand of controlled fury. "I'm going to give you one chance," Beatrice continued, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that somehow carried even more menace. "One opportunity to salvage not only your job, but any hope of finding employment in this industry again." The dining room fell silent, except for the soft clink of silverware and the barely audible hum of the ventilation system. Even conversations at distant tables had ceased as patrons strained to hear what would happen next. "You're going to stand here in front of all these witnesses and admit your failures," Beatrice declared. "You're going to acknowledge that you've provided substandard service, that you've been hostile and unprofessional, and you're going to beg for forgiveness, not just from my family, but from every customer in this restaurant who has had to witness your behavior." Charles held up his phone, grinning with anticipation. "And I'll be recording every word. Think of it as a teaching moment that could go viral." Richard nodded approvingly. "It's really quite generous when you think about it. Most employers would simply fire someone like her without any opportunity for redemption." Cleo looked around the dining room, taking in the faces of the other customers. Some watched with obvious discomfort, clearly recognizing the injustice of the situation, but uncertain how to intervene. Others seemed transfixed by the drama, their phones raised like electronic vultures. A few appeared genuinely angry, but remained seated, unwilling to become involved in someone else's confrontation. "Alternatively," Beatrice said, her smile turning razor sharp, "you can maintain this stubborn pride of yours, in which case, I guarantee that by tomorrow morning, every restaurant owner, hotel manager, and catering company within a 50-mile radius will know your name and exactly why you're unemployable." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Isabella stepped fully out of the kitchen doorway, no longer caring about protocol or revealing Cleo's identity. Some lines simply couldn't be crossed without consequences. But before Isabella could speak, before Natalia could abandon her post, before any of the uncomfortable customers could find their voices, Cleo Navarro lifted her chin and looked directly into Beatrice Wyndham's eyes. The natural light streaming through the skylights seemed to intensify, as if the universe itself was preparing to illuminate whatever would happen next. In that moment, with dozens of phones pointed in her direction and the weight of her family's reputation hanging in the balance, Cleo made a decision that would change everything. The tension in the room reached its breaking point as two different worlds prepared to collide with explosive force. The elegant dining room of Navarro's buzzed with uncomfortable energy as Beatrice Wyndham's voice rose another octave, her red designer dress catching the fluorescent light like a warning beacon. Every conversation at every table had either stopped completely or dropped to hushed whispers as diners craned their necks to witness the spectacle unfolding at table 7. "I said clean it properly," Beatrice shrieked, gesturing wildly at the wine stain she had deliberately created on the pristine white tablecloth. "Do I need to teach you how to use a rag? Or is that beyond your capabilities?" Cleo Navarro maintained her professional composure, her black dress shirt and dark slacks immaculate despite the chaos surrounding her. Inside, her Harvard MBA training battled against every instinct screaming at her to reveal who she really was. The daughter of Miguel Navarro, successful restaurateur and owner of this very establishment, had never imagined her undercover experience would test her this severely. The natural skylight streaming through the tall windows illuminated the growing crowd of spectators as Charles Wyndham pulled out his phone with predatory excitement. His green button-down shirt was slightly wrinkled from leaning forward eagerly, and his eyes gleamed with malicious anticipation. "This is perfect," Charles announced to his father Richard, who sat back in his orange polo shirt with an ugly grin spreading across his face. "My followers are going to eat this up." Charles held up his phone, angling it to capture both his own face and the ongoing humiliation of Cleo. "What's up, everyone? Your boy Charles here with some premium entertainment. We're at this fancy restaurant where the service is absolutely terrible, and we're about to teach this entitled worker a lesson about respect." The live stream notification popped up on his social media, and within seconds, viewers began flooding in. Comments started rolling across his screen, and Charles's smile widened as he read them aloud for everyone to hear. "Oh, this is great. Tommy_B Business says, show her who's boss, and King Cash 47 wants to know if she's going to cry. Don't worry, guys. We're just getting started." Across the dining room, Raymond Jackson felt his stomach turn as he watched the degrading display. The experienced black server had witnessed discrimination before, but this level of calculated cruelty made his hands shake with anger. He caught the eye of Mrs. Patterson, a regular customer at table 12, and made his decision. "Mrs. Patterson." Raymond approached quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "That young lady they're harassing? That's Cleo Navarro, Miguel's daughter." Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened in shock, her coffee cup freezing halfway to her lips. "Miguel's daughter? But why is she?" "She's been working her way through every position in the restaurant, learning the business from the ground up before she takes over." Raymond's voice carried quiet pride mixed with protective anger. "And right now, she's getting a master class in how some people treat service workers." The revelation spread like wildfire through the dining room as Raymond discreetly moved from table to table, sharing the truth with longtime customers who had watched Miguel build his empire from nothing. Faces shifted from curiosity to outrage as the reality of the situation became clear. At that moment, the front door chimed softly as Constance Fairfax entered, her authoritative presence immediately commanding attention. The renowned food critic surveyed the scene with sharp eyes, her professional instincts immediately recognizing toxic dynamics when she saw them. Constance had been reviewing restaurants for over 2 decades, and she possessed an almost supernatural ability to read the energy of a dining room. The tension crackling through Navarro's was unlike anything she had experienced in years. From her hostess station, Natalia Vega watched the food critic's arrival with a mixture of relief and desperation. Natalia had been frantically trying to reach Arthur Hensley, the restaurant manager, but he remained tied up with a private event on the 2nd floor. The phone at her station had become her lifeline as she scrolled through her contacts with trembling fingers. Miguel Navarro's personal number stared back at her from the screen. Natalia had never called the owner directly, but watching Cleo endure this abuse while maintaining her cover was breaking her heart. She pressed the call button and held her breath. "Miguel, it's Natalia from the downtown location. I'm so sorry to bother you, but we have a situation here. It's about Cleo." 25 miles across town at Navarro's Harbor District location, Miguel Navarro felt his blood freeze. His daughter's undercover experience had been going smoothly for weeks, and hearing distress in Natalia's voice sent immediate alarm bells through his mind. "What kind of situation?" Miguel asked, already reaching for his blue jacket and car keys. "There's a family here, the Wyndhams. They're being incredibly racist and cruel to Cleo, and she's not breaking cover. Miguel, they're live streaming it and making her clean up messes they're creating on purpose. It's getting really bad." Miguel's jaw clenched as fury and protective instincts warred within him. His daughter had insisted on authentic experience, including facing the challenges that service workers encountered daily. But this crossed every line of human decency. "I'm leaving now," Miguel said firmly. "Keep an eye on her and document everything you can." Back in the main dining room, the situation continued to deteriorate as Richard Wyndham decided to join his family's performance. The middle-aged man in his orange polo shirt leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning Cleo's body in a way that made nearby diners visibly uncomfortable. "You know what I think the problem is?" Richard announced loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "These people get jobs they're not qualified for, and then they act like they deserve respect. Look at her. She's probably never seen the inside of a college classroom." Several patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and Dr. Williams at table 4 actually stood up halfway before his wife gently pulled him back down. "That's completely inappropriate," whispered Sandra Chen to her lunch companion. "Should we say something?" But before anyone could intervene, Richard continued his disgusting commentary, his voice growing more crude and personal. "I mean, she's got the right assets for certain types of work, if you know what I mean. Maybe she should consider a career change to something more suited to her natural talents." The dining room fell into stunned silence as Richard's implications hung in the air like poison. Even Charles looked momentarily uncomfortable, though he kept his phone recording. Beatrice Wyndham actually smiled at her husband's crude suggestion, nodding approvingly. From the kitchen doorway, Isabella Moreno had heard enough. The head chef and longtime family friend had been watching through the service window, growing increasingly agitated as the harassment escalated. Now she pulled out her own phone and began recording, her hands steady despite her rage. Isabella had known Cleo since she was a little girl bringing her father lunch during his 18-hour workdays. She had watched Miguel sacrifice everything to build this business, and she had celebrated when Cleo graduated from Harvard with honors. Seeing this brilliant young woman subjected to such degradation was testing every ounce of her professional restraint. Constance Fairfax moved through the dining room with purpose, her trained eye cataloging every detail of the unfolding drama. As she passed table after table, she caught fragments of whispered conversations that painted a disturbing picture. "That's Miguel Navarro's daughter. She's got an MBA from Harvard. They have no idea who they're messing with." The pieces clicked together in Constance's mind, and she realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just discrimination against a service worker. This was a masterclass in hidden identity and delayed justice. Charles continued his live stream commentary, his viewer count climbing as word spread across social media. "Okay everyone, we're at about 300 viewers now. This entitled server thinks she can give us attitude, but we're teaching her about the real world. In business, you need to know your place." The comments rolling across his screen had begun to shift, however. Early supporters were being drowned out by viewers who found the display disturbing. "Dude, this is gross. Just let her do her job. Why are you being so mean to someone trying to work? This isn't funny. It's just cruel." But Charles was too intoxicated by his own performance to notice the changing tide. He angled his phone to capture Cleo's face as she continued cleaning their table with professional dignity. "See that expression? That's what defeat looks like. This is what happens when participation trophy generation meets real-world consequences." Across the restaurant, Miguel Navarro's car pulled into the parking lot, with tires squealing slightly from his urgent drive across town. His hands gripped the steering wheel as he prepared to enter a situation that would test every principle he had built his business upon. The network Raymond Jackson had quietly assembled throughout the dining room watched the front entrance with anticipation. Regular customers who had supported Miguel's business for years sat ready to witness a reckoning that would become legendary in the restaurant industry. Natalia Vega spotted Miguel's blue jacket through the front windows and felt a mixture of relief and anticipation wash over her. She caught Raymond's eye across the room and nodded slightly, their silent communication confirming that help was finally arriving. Isabella Moreno continued recording from the kitchen doorway, ensuring that every second of the Wyndham family's behavior was preserved for posterity. Her phone captured not just their cruelty, but also Cleo's remarkable composure under pressure. As Miguel Navarro reached for the front door handle, the entire restaurant held its breath. The fluorescent lights seemed to brighten, the natural skylight appeared to intensify, and every conversation stopped as the moment of truth approached. Inside, Cleo Navarro sensed a shift in the room's energy. Her internal struggle between maintaining her cover and defending herself had reached a crescendo, but something told her that the decision might soon be taken out of her hands. The witnesses had gathered, the whispers had spread, and Justice was walking through the front door in a blue jacket, ready to protect his daughter and defend the values his restaurant represented. The confrontation was about to reach its explosive climax, and everyone present would remember exactly where they were standing when truth finally met consequence in the bright fluorescent-lit dining room of Navarro's restaurant. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the dining room as Beatrice Wyndham rose from her chair like a predator sensing wounded prey. Her red Chanel dress caught the overhead lighting as she moved with deliberate precision toward Cleo Navarro, who stood frozen beside the service station. The afternoon crowd had grown larger, every table occupied with patrons who were now witnessing something far more dramatic than their usual lunch experience. "Oh no, we're not done here," Beatrice announced, her voice carrying across the restaurant with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Her designer heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached Cleo, each step calculated to intimidate. "You think you can just stand there with that defiant little smirk and disrespect my family?" Cleo felt her back press against the service station as Beatrice invaded her personal space, the older woman's expensive perfume mixing with the lingering scent of wine she had deliberately spilled earlier. The fluorescent lighting above seemed to intensify, illuminating every detail of this confrontation that was spiraling beyond anything she had experienced in her months of working incognito. "I want to know something about you," Beatrice continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more menacing than shouting. "What kind of upbringing produces someone so utterly lacking in basic courtesy and respect? Were you raised by wolves, or did your parents simply never teach you your place in civilized society?" Charles Wyndham had repositioned himself to capture the best angle, his green button-down shirt slightly wrinkled from his animated gestures as he provided running commentary to his live stream audience. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, people. Watch how entitled these service workers get when you try to hold them accountable for basic professionalism." The young man's phone screen showed dozens of comments flooding in, though his followers seemed divided between support and growing concern about what they were witnessing. He adjusted his position, making sure to capture his mother's confrontation while maintaining his own prominent place in the frame. "You see this attitude?" Charles continued addressing his phone screen. "This is what happens when certain people get hired without proper qualifications. They think they can treat paying customers with disrespect and get away with it." Richard Wyndham remained seated but leaned back in his chair. His orange polo shirt stretched tight across his stomach as he watched his wife work. His expression showed the satisfaction of someone enjoying a performance completely disconnected from the human cost of their entertainment. Cleo's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the service station behind her. Every instinct screamed at her to reveal who she was. to end this humiliation with a single sentence that would transform their smug satisfaction into horror. But something deeper held her back, a need to see exactly how far people like the Wyndhams would go when they believed they held all the power. "Answer me when I'm speaking to you," Beatrice demanded, stepping even closer. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed to flicker, or perhaps it was Cleo's vision wavering under the intensity of the moment. "I asked you about your upbringing. Were your parents too busy to teach you basic manners? Or are you simply too limited intellectually to understand appropriate behavior?" A woman at table 12 stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor loud enough to cut through the tension. "Excuse me, but this is completely inappropriate. You're treating this young woman terribly." Beatrice didn't even turn around as she responded, "Mind your own business. This doesn't concern you." The woman, dressed in a navy business suit, stepped closer. "It concerns everyone here. Your behavior is absolutely disgraceful." Another bleeding heart liberal, Charles announced to his phone, pivoting to film the intervening customer. "Watch how they always jump to defend people who clearly can't handle basic job responsibilities." More diners began voicing their objections, creating a chorus of disapproval that echoed off the walls of the bright dining room. An elderly gentleman in a blue jacket stood up from his corner table, his weathered hands gripping his walking cane as he addressed the Wyndham family directly. "Young lady," he called to Beatrice, his voice carrying the authority of his 8 decades. "I've been coming to this establishment for 15 years, and I've never seen such appalling behavior from customers. You should be ashamed of yourselves." Beatrice finally turned away from Cleo, her red dress swirling as she faced the growing crowd of critics. Her expression showed no shame, only irritation at the interruption of her demonstration of power. "All of you can save your sanctimonious lectures," she declared, her voice rising to address the entire dining room. "My family has been supporting fine establishments like this for generations. We know what quality service looks like, and we refuse to accept anything less." She gestured dismissively toward Cleo without looking at her. "This girl has been nothing but hostile and incompetent since we arrived. If you want to enable that kind of behavior, that says more about your standards than ours." Raymond Jackson had moved closer from his section across the dining room, his experienced eye recognizing that this situation was reaching a dangerous crescendo. He caught Cleo's eye and saw something there that made him pause. Instead of the desperation or fear he expected, he saw a cold determination that suggested she was far from helpless. The natural skylight streaming through the restaurant's large windows created an almost theatrical contrast with the harsh fluorescent lighting, as if nature itself was providing dramatic illumination for this confrontation. Other servers had slowed their movements, unable to focus on their duties, while watching one of their own endure such treatment. Beatrice turned back to Cleo with renewed viciousness, apparently energized by the attention and opposition from other diners. "You want to know what I think? I think you've gotten by your entire life making excuses and playing victim instead of actually working to better yourself." Her voice grew louder, ensuring every person in the restaurant could hear her words. "I think you've been told you're special when you're utterly ordinary. I think you've been given opportunities you didn't earn and certainly don't deserve." Cleo felt something shift inside her chest, a transformation from the defensive posture she had maintained throughout this ordeal. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from childhood lessons about dignity under pressure, about the responsibility that came with power and privilege. "Let me be very clear about something," Beatrice continued, her finger pointing directly at Cleo's face. "I have connections throughout this city that you couldn't even imagine. I can make sure that every quality restaurant knows exactly what kind of employee you are." Charles lowered his phone slightly, sensing that his mother was building towards something significant. His green button-down shirt was now damp with perspiration as he realized the scope of attention their confrontation was attracting. "I can have you blacklisted from every decent establishment within 100 miles. Beatrice declared, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had never had their threats challenged. "You'll be lucky to find work at a fast food drive-thru when I'm finished with you." The restaurant had grown quieter, with even the kitchen staff visible through the service window as they watched this unprecedented scene unfold. Isabella Moreno stood in the kitchen doorway, her chef's coat bright white under the fluorescent lights, her expression a mixture of rage and concern as she watched Cleo endure this assault. A new voice cut through the tension as Constance Fairfax approached the confrontation. The renowned food critic moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding respect in the culinary world. Her silver hair perfectly styled and her black dress jacket marking her professional authority. "Excuse me," Constance said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone used to being heard. "I couldn't help but notice this situation, and I feel compelled to introduce myself." Beatrice turned toward this new interruption with visible annoyance, clearly frustrated by the continued interference with her demonstration of power. "And you are?" "Constance Fairfax, food critic for Metropolitan Dining Magazine and the Tribune," she replied, producing a business card from her jacket pocket. "I'm here for a scheduled review, but I have to say, I'm witnessing behavior that's far more noteworthy than any meal." Charles immediately pointed his phone toward Constance, recognizing that a professional food critic could provide either validation or serious consequences for their family. His commentary took on a more nervous tone as he tried to control the narrative. "See, even professional critics are paying attention to how certain employees treat customers," he announced to his live stream, though his voice carried less confidence than before. Constance fixed him with a steady gaze that made him lower his phone slightly. "Young man, I'm documenting behavior, but perhaps not the behavior you think." She turned back to Beatrice with professional composure that somehow managed to convey deep disapproval. "Ma'am, I've been reviewing restaurants for over 20 years, and I've never witnessed customers treating staff with such deliberate cruelty." "Cruelty?" Beatrice laughed, a sound that carried no humor. "This is accountability. This is what happens when standards are maintained instead of lowered to accommodate mediocrity." The fluorescent lighting seemed to intensify the red of her dress as she stepped closer to Constance, apparently viewing the critic as another obstacle to overcome rather than a serious threat to her position. "Let me educate you about something," Beatrice continued, her voice taking on the condescending tone she had perfected over decades of believing her wealth granted her moral authority. "People like us, who actually contribute to society, who build businesses and create jobs, have every right to expect excellence from those who serve us." She gestured toward Cleo without looking at her. "When someone like her fails to meet basic standards, it's our responsibility to provide correction. That's how society functions properly." Constance pulled out her phone and began typing notes, her expression growing more stern with each word Beatrice spoke. "I see. And you believe your financial position gives you the right to humiliate service workers publicly. It gives us the right to expect what we pay for." Richard called from his seat, finally joining the conversation as he realized their family's reputation might be at stake. His orange polo shirt was now visibly stained with sweat as he recognized the potential consequences of this confrontation. "We're not asking for anything unreasonable," he continued, his voice taking on the placating tone of someone trying to diffuse a situation that had grown beyond his comfort level. "We simply expect professional service, and when that's not provided, we have every right to express our dissatisfaction." Isabella Moreno had emerged fully from the kitchen now, her white chef's coat and black slacks marking her authority as she approached the confrontation. Her normally warm expression was replaced by something harder, more protective, as she positioned herself near Cleo. "I've been watching this entire situation," Isabella announced, her voice carrying a slight accent that became more pronounced when she was emotional. "This young woman has done nothing but try to provide excellent service while being subjected to treatment that no human being should endure." Beatrice whirled to face this new challenger, her red dress catching the light as she moved. Oh, wonderful. Now the kitchen staff is getting involved. This is exactly what I'm talking about. No respect for hierarchy. No understanding of appropriate boundaries. The confrontation had drawn the attention of every person in the restaurant now, creating an amphitheater effect, with the Wyndham family at the center of a growing circle of disapproval. The natural skylight streaming through the windows created dramatic contrasts with the fluorescent overhead lighting, as if the very architecture of the space was emphasizing the theatricality of the moment. Cleo felt the service station behind her, solid and reassuring, as she drew upon reserves of strength she had developed through years of preparation for exactly this kind of challenge. Her father's lessons about leadership, about dignity under pressure, about the responsibility that came with power, crystallized into perfect clarity. "You want to know what I think?" Beatrice said, turning back to Cleo with renewed viciousness. "I think you're exactly the kind of person who has been told your entire life that you're a victim instead of being encouraged to actually improve yourself." Her voice grew louder, more vicious, as she sensed the growing opposition from the other diners and decided to double down rather than retreat. "I think you've been given opportunities through quota systems instead of merit, and now you think you deserve respect you haven't earned." The fluorescent lights overhead seemed to pulse with the intensity of the moment, as Cleo felt something fundamental shift inside her. The months of working anonymously, of learning her father's business from the ground up, of understanding exactly how people like the Wyndhams viewed people like her, had led to this precise moment. Charles continued filming, but his commentary had grown more uncertain as he realized his family's behavior was being documented by multiple sources and broadcast to an audience that seemed increasingly unsympathetic to their position. Beatrice stepped even closer to Cleo, invading her personal space in a final attempt to force submission through intimidation. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to my family for your attitude and incompetence. You're going to admit that you failed to provide appropriate service. And then maybe, just maybe, I'll consider not destroying your pathetic little career." The restaurant had grown silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of kitchen equipment. Every eye was focused on this confrontation that had transcended a simple customer service dispute to become something much more significant. Cleo looked around at the faces watching her, at Isabella Moreno's protective stance, at Constance Fairfax documenting everything, at the other diners who had spoken up in her defense. She thought about her father Miguel, about his journey from busboy to successful restaurateur, about the lessons he had taught her about dignity and responsibility. The moment had arrived when she would have to choose between continuing this experiment in anonymity and protecting herself from further abuse. As she looked into Beatrice Wyndham's eyes, seeing the absolute certainty of someone who had never been challenged, never been held accountable, never faced real consequences for cruelty disguised as privilege, Cleo made her decision. The fluorescent light seemed to brighten as she straightened her shoulders and prepared to transform this confrontation forever. The main doors of Navarro's swung open with quiet authority, and Miguel Navarro stepped into his restaurant. His blue jacket caught the bright overhead fluorescent lighting as his experienced eyes immediately swept across the dining room, taking in the unusual tension that hung in the air like smoke. Every conversation had stopped. Every patron had turned to watch the confrontation unfolding near table 7. The natural skylight streaming through the windows illuminated his weathered face as he processed the scene before him. Natalia Vega abandoned her hostess station immediately, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she rushed toward him. Her face was flushed with anxiety and anger, her professional composure finally cracking after watching the abuse escalate for far too long. "Mr. Navarro, thank God you're here," she whispered urgently, gesturing toward where Beatrice Wyndham stood in her red designer dress, still berating Cleo. "That woman has been tormenting Cleo for over an hour. The things she's said, the way she's treated her, It's been absolutely vicious. Miguel's jaw tightened as he watched his daughter maintain her professional stance, despite the obvious emotional assault. He had built this restaurant from nothing, working 16-hour days as a young immigrant, and he had raised Cleo to understand that dignity wasn't something others could take from you. But seeing her endure this level of public humiliation made his blood boil. The entire restaurant had become an audience now. Business executives paused with forks halfway to their mouths. The couple at table 3 had their phones out, recording everything. Even the kitchen staff had gathered near the service window, their faces tight with anger and helplessness. Cleo saw her father enter and felt something shift inside her chest. For the past hour, she had maintained her cover, learning lessons about humanity that no Harvard classroom could teach. She had discovered the casual cruelty that people like Beatrice Wyndham inflicted on those they perceived as powerless. She had experienced firsthand the solidarity of working people and the courage it took to serve others with dignity. But now, watching her father's concerned expression as he took in the scene, Cleo made her decision. She wouldn't let him fight this battle for her. She had endured enough to understand what needed to be understood. The experiment was over. Beatrice Wyndham was mid-sentence, her voice carrying across the silent dining room as she delivered another cutting remark about Cleo's supposed lack of intelligence and breeding. People like you need to understand your place in society. You exist to serve your betters, not to have opinions or make demands. Cleo reached behind her back and slowly untied her black server's apron. The simple gesture caught everyone's attention, including Beatrice's, who paused in her tirade with a confused frown. "Mrs. Wyndham," Cleo said, her voice carrying a new authority that made the fluorescent lights seem brighter. The air seemed sharper. She folded the apron carefully and placed it on the nearest table. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The transformation in Cleo's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. Her posture straightened, her shoulders squared, and her eyes held a confidence that hadn't been there moments before. The respectful deference was gone, replaced by the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. "My name is Cleo Navarro," she continued, her voice clear enough to carry throughout the dining room. "I am the daughter of Miguel Navarro, the owner of this establishment. I am also the future proprietor of this restaurant and 3 others in the city." The silence that followed was deafening. Beatrice Wyndham's mouth fell open, her red lipstick suddenly garish under the overhead lighting. Charles Wyndham stopped mid-scroll on his phone, his green button-down shirt wrinkled now from his frantic movements. Richard Wyndham's orange polo shirt seemed to shrink against his body as the color drained from his face. "That's impossible," Beatrice sputtered, her composure cracking like cheap veneer. "You're lying. You're just a waitress. Look at you." Miguel Navarro approached with the quiet dignity that had earned him respect throughout the city's restaurant community. His presence commanded attention without demanding it, and as he walked toward his daughter, other patrons began to murmur recognition. His success story was well known in business circles. The immigrant busboy, who had built a culinary empire through hard work and integrity. "Mia," he said warmly, embracing Cleo with genuine affection. His blue jacket was immaculate, his silver hair perfectly groomed, every inch the successful businessman. "I got Natalia's message. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Papa," Cleo replied, accepting his hug while keeping her eyes fixed on the Wyndham family. "I've been getting a very thorough education in customer service." The implications were sinking in now, and the Wyndham family's expressions shifted like a time-lapse of dawning horror. Charles frantically began tapping his phone screen, trying to delete the social media posts he had made just minutes earlier. His live stream was still running, comments flooding in as viewers realized what they were witnessing. "This has to be some kind of joke," Richard Wyndham stammered, his voice weak and desperate. "A setup or something." Why would the owner's daughter be working as a server? Miguel turned his attention to the family who had spent the last hour abusing his daughter, and his expression was calm but unmistakably dangerous. My daughter is preparing to take over the family business. She insisted on working every position, learning every aspect of the operation. She wanted to understand what our employees experience, how our customers behave, what it really means to serve others with dignity. Constance Fairfax, the food critic, had been watching from her corner table with growing amazement. Now she approached slowly, her notebook out, recognizing that she was witnessing something extraordinary. "And what did you learn, Miss Navarro?" she asked respectfully. Cleo looked around the dining room, taking in the faces of people who had watched her endure abuse, some with sympathy, others with indifference, and a few with barely concealed glee. "I learned that some people mistake kindness for weakness, service for servitude, and politeness for powerlessness. I learned that cruelty reveals more about the person inflicting it than the person receiving it." Beatrice Wyndham was shaking her head violently, her red dress seeming to vibrate with her agitation. "I don't believe this. Show me proof. Anyone can claim anything." "Proof?" Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Isabella, would you mind?" Isabella Moreno had been watching from the kitchen doorway, and now she disappeared briefly before returning with a folder from Miguel's office. She walked across the dining room with purpose, her chef's whites pristine under the fluorescent lighting. "Here," Isabella said, opening the folder to reveal family photographs. Miguel and Cleo at her Harvard graduation. Cleo in a business suit cutting the ribbon at the opening of their newest location. Father and daughter together at various charity events and industry awards ceremonies. Cleo has been part of this business since she was old enough to bus tables. I've watched her grow up. The restaurant erupted in applause. Spontaneous, thunderous applause that seemed to shake the windows and bounce off the walls. Regular customers who recognized both Navarros from social events began calling out words of support. The business executives at Table 5 raised their wine glasses in tribute. Even the kitchen staff emerged to join the celebration. Charles Wyndham had gone pale, staring at his phone in horror as the comments on his live stream turned viciously against him. His followers were witnessing his family's public humiliation in real time, and the video was being shared rapidly across social platforms. "Delete it," Beatrice hissed at her son. "Delete everything now." "It's too late," Charles whispered, his voice barely audible above the applause. "It's been shared hundreds of times already. People are screen recording everything." Richard Wyndham stepped forward, his orange polo shirt damp with perspiration. "Look, this is all just a misunderstanding. We didn't know. Surely we can work something out. What do you want? Money? We can make a donation to charity." Miguel's expression didn't change, but his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "What I want, Mr. Wyndham, is for you to understand that your money doesn't give you the right to treat other human beings like garbage. Your wealth doesn't make you superior to the people who serve you." The applause was dying down now, but the energy in the room remained electric. Other patrons were pulling out their phones, not to mock or humiliate, but to document this moment of justice. The natural skylight, streaming through the windows, seemed to spotlight the Wyndham family's shame. Beatrice made one last desperate attempt to salvage her dignity. "This is entrapment. You deliberately deceived us. We'll sue for emotional distress, for fraud, for whatever our lawyers can think of." Cleo smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had just won a game that the other players hadn't even realized they were playing. "Mrs. Wyndham, I was simply doing my job. Everything you said and did was your choice. Your character revealed itself without any encouragement from me." The fluorescent light seemed to grow brighter, illuminating every detail of this perfect reversal of power. The Wyndham family, who had entered as conquerors, now stood exposed and humiliated before an audience of their peers. The woman they had tried to destroy was revealed as their superior in every meaningful way. Constance Fairfax was scribbling notes furiously, already composing the review that would make this incident legendary in restaurant industry circles. Raymond Jackson stood with his arms crossed and a satisfied smile, having witnessed the best possible outcome. Natalia Vega wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed with relief and pride. The revelation was complete, and the power dynamic had shifted so dramatically that the air itself seemed to hum with electricity. Justice had been served in the most public and satisfying way possible, and everyone present understood they had witnessed something truly extraordinary. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the tall windows cast everything in sharp relief, making the scene feel almost cinematic in its clarity. Miguel Navarro stood with quiet authority beside his daughter, his blue jacket perfectly pressed, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the Wyndham family with the measured gaze of a man who had built his empire through decades of hard work and unwavering principles. "Let me be absolutely clear," Miguel said, his voice carrying the weight of finality that comes only from someone who has never had to raise it to command respect. "You are permanently banned from this establishment and all of our locations. Your behavior toward my daughter, toward any member of our staff, is unacceptable and will not be tolerated." Beatrice Wyndham's red designer dress, which had seemed so elegant and commanding just moments before, now appeared gaudy under the fluorescent lighting. Her face flushed crimson as she sputtered, "You can't do this. We're paying customers. We have rights." "You have the right to leave," Miguel replied calmly, his slight accent lending gravity to each word. Immediately, from across the dining room, Constance Fairfax stepped forward, her notebook already in hand. The renowned food critic's presence commanded attention as she approached the group, her silver hair gleaming under the overhead lights. "Excuse me," Constance said, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose words could make or break restaurants throughout the city. "I'm Constance Fairfax from Metropolitan Dining Review. I've been observing this entire situation, and I want you to know, Mr. Navarro, that what I witnessed today was absolutely extraordinary." Cleo felt her heart skip as one of the most influential food critics in the country addressed her directly. Constance continued, "Your professionalism under such deplorable circumstances speaks volumes about your character and the values of this establishment. This incident will absolutely be featured in my upcoming review, highlighting not just the exceptional food, but the exceptional people who make this restaurant what it is." Charles Wyndham's face went pale as he frantically tapped at his phone screen, trying to delete the live stream that had been broadcasting his family's humiliation to hundreds of viewers. But it was too late. The comments section was exploding with criticism, his followers turning against him in real time. "Oh my God," he muttered, his green button-down now wrinkled from nervous sweating. The comments. They're saying, "Mom, we need to go, now." But Richard Wyndham, in his orange polo shirt that now seemed almost comically bright against his ashen complexion, had a different approach. He reached into his wallet, pulling out a thick stack of bills and holding them toward Miguel with shaking hands. "Look, let's be reasonable here," Richard said, his voice desperate. "This is all just a misunderstanding. How much to make this go away? We're willing to compensate you for any inconvenience." The silence that followed was deafening. Miguel's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Other patrons stopped their conversations entirely, watching in stunned disbelief as Richard continued waving the money. "You think this is about money?" Cleo asked, her voice quiet but carrying clearly across the dining room. "You think you can pay for the right to dehumanize people?" "We didn't dehumanize anyone," Beatrice shrieked, her composure finally cracking completely. "This is discrimination. You're discriminating against us because we're successful, because we have standards." The absurdity of her claim hung in the air like smoke. Around the dining room, other customers began pulling out their phones, some recording openly, while others discreetly captured the unfolding drama. The soft clicks of camera shutters and the quiet beeps of recording apps created a subtle soundtrack to the Wyndham family's downfall. At a corner table, a young couple shared knowing looks as the woman typed rapidly on her phone. "This is going straight to my Twitter," she whispered to her companion. "Everyone needs to see what kind of people these are." Near the window, an older gentleman shook his head in disgust as he watched Richard still holding out the money. "40 years I've been coming to this restaurant," he said to his dining companion, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Never seen such shameful behavior. That young lady handled herself with more class than I would have." Raymond Jackson approached Miguel, his server's uniform pristine despite the emotional intensity of the afternoon. His dark hands held a small tablet where he had been discreetly documenting everything. "Mr. Navarro," Raymond said quietly, "I've been recording audio and taking notes of everything that was said. I also have witness contact information from several customers who want to provide statements if needed." Miguel nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Raymond. Please coordinate with Natalia to ensure we have everything documented properly." Natalia Vega hurried over from the hostess stand, her hair slightly disheveled from the stress, but her expression determined. "I've already started a file," she said, holding up her own phone. "Multiple customers have given me their contact information. They want to make sure there are consequences for this behavior." Beatrice Wyndham overheard and turned toward them, her red dress swishing dramatically as she pointed an accusatory finger. "You're all conspiring against us. This is a setup. I'm calling my lawyer. We'll sue you for defamation, for emotional distress, for discrimination against wealthy patrons." Her voice rose to near hysteria, causing several diners to visibly wince. A mother at a nearby table quietly guided her young children toward the restaurant's play area, not wanting them to witness the adult tantrum unfolding. "Mom, please," Charles hissed, still staring at his phone in horror as his notifications continued exploding. "My business school network is seeing this. My LinkedIn is getting tagged. We need to leave now before this gets worse." But it was already too late for damage control. The video had been shared across multiple platforms, and the story was writing itself in real time. Comments poured in from viewers expressing outrage at the family's behavior and admiration for Cleo's composure. From the kitchen, Isabella Moreno emerged carrying something that made Cleo's breath catch. In her hands was a pristine white chef's jacket, the kind reserved for senior kitchen staff, with C. Navarro embroidered in elegant script across the chest. "Mija," Isabella said warmly, using the affectionate term she had called Cleo since childhood. "I think it's time you had this." The symbolic gesture was not lost on anyone in the dining room. As Isabella helped Cleo slip on the jacket over her black dress shirt, the transformation was complete. No longer was she a server enduring abuse. She stood revealed as the heir to a culinary empire, surrounded by a chosen family who had rallied to protect and support her. The jacket fit perfectly, and as Cleo buttoned it up, she felt the weight of her future settling onto her shoulders. Around the dining room, spontaneous applause broke out, customers rising to their feet to honor both her revelation and her grace under pressure. Beatrice Wyndham watched this display with increasing fury, her face cycling through shades of red that nearly matched her dress. "This is all theater," she declared, "staged for sympathy. Real business owners don't play dress-up games with their staff." "Real business owners," Miguel said quietly, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a blade, "raise their children to understand that every person deserves dignity and respect, regardless of their job title or background." The simple statement carried such moral authority that even Beatrice fell momentarily silent. Around the dining room, customers nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears at the quiet power of the moment. Constance Fairfax continued taking notes, her experienced eye capturing not just the drama, but the deeper story of family, values, and the true meaning of hospitality. This would become more than just a restaurant review. It would be a commentary on character, class, and the dangerous assumptions people make about others. Richard finally lowered his handful of money. The bills crumpled from his sweaty grip. The gesture that had seemed so natural to him minutes before now felt obscene in the face of Miguel's dignity and Cleo's quiet strength. "We should go," he mumbled to his family, finally recognizing that every additional moment in the restaurant only deepened their humiliation. But Beatrice wasn't finished. Her red dress seemed to glow with her fury as she made one final attempt to salvage her pride. "Don't think this is over," she hissed at Cleo. "My family has connections throughout this city. We'll make sure everyone knows what kind of establishment this really is." "Yes," Cleo replied calmly, her chef's jacket giving her a new kind of armor. "Please do tell everyone exactly what happened here today. Make sure you don't leave out any details." The quiet confidence in her voice was devastating. Around the room, customers chuckled at the perfect response, recognizing that Beatrice had just promised to spread the very story that would destroy her own reputation. Charles grabbed his mother's arm, desperation clear in his voice. "Mom, we have to go, please. This is already everywhere online." Finally, reality seemed to penetrate Beatrice's rage. She looked around the dining room and saw what everyone else had been seeing. A family who had exposed their own ugliness through their treatment of someone they considered beneath them, only to discover they had been attacking someone whose family owned the very establishment they frequented. The irony was complete, the justice poetic, and the consequences were only just beginning. As the Wyndham family finally began their walk of shame toward the exit, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows seemed to shine even brighter, illuminating not just their departure, but the beginning of a new chapter for Cleo Navarro and everyone who had witnessed her remarkable grace under fire. The dining room buzzed with conversation as customers processed what they had experienced, many already crafting social media posts that would ensure this story spread far beyond the restaurant's walls. Justice, it seemed, would be served in many courses. The fluorescent lights overhead cast their unforgiving brightness on Beatrice Wyndham's red dress as she stood frozen in the center of the dining room, her face flushed with humiliation and rage. The woman who had terrorized Cleo Navarro for over an hour now found herself the target of dozens of disapproving stares from fellow patrons. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air as she struggled to process the complete reversal of her perceived power. "This is preposterous," Beatrice finally managed, her voice cracking with desperation. "I don't care who you claim to be. Your behavior today was completely unprofessional, and I will be filing complaints with every restaurant association in the city." Her threats rang hollow in the spacious dining room where natural skylight, streaming through the windows, seemed to expose every flaw in her character. Miguel Navarro stepped forward, his blue jacket pristine and his bearing dignified despite the chaos his daughter had endured. "Mrs. Wyndham," he said with quiet authority, "you've spent the last hour humiliating my daughter with racist attacks, degrading comments, and threats to destroy her livelihood. The only complaint that will be filed today is ours, and it will be accompanied by video evidence from multiple sources." Charles Wyndham frantically tapped his phone screen, his green button-down shirt now wrinkled from stress as he desperately tried to delete his live stream. But the damage was already spreading across social media platforms faster than he could contain it. Comments flooded in from his business school network, former classmates expressing disgust at his behavior and distancing themselves from his actions. "Dad, we need to leave now," Charles whispered urgently to his father. "This is going viral. My LinkedIn notifications are exploding." Richard Wyndham's orange polo shirt was damp with perspiration as he pulled out his wallet with shaking hands. "Look, Mr. Navarro, surely we can work something out. I'm prepared to compensate you for any misunderstanding today." His voice carried the entitled assumption that money could erase the deliberate cruelty his family had displayed. The offer drew audible gasps from nearby diners. A middle-aged woman at table 12 shook her head in disgust. Did he really just try to buy his way out of being a racist? She said loud enough for the entire room to hear. Cleo Navarro placed a gentle hand on her father's arm, stepping forward to address Richard directly. "Mr. Wyndham, your money can't purchase dignity or respect. Those are earned through character, something your family has proven to lack entirely." Beatrice Wyndham's composure cracked completely as she pointed a manicured finger at Cleo. "Don't you lecture us about character. I've built relationships in this city that span decades. One phone call from me can destroy businesses. You think revealing some nepotistic connection will protect you from the consequences of your attitude today?" The dining room fell silent as customers absorbed the sheer audacity of Beatrice's continued threats. Raymond Jackson, who had witnessed decades of discrimination in the service industry, stepped forward from his section. His experienced eyes held steady on Beatrice as he spoke clearly for everyone to hear. "Ma'am, I've worked in fine dining for 25 years, and I've never seen anything as disgraceful as what you put this young woman through today. You questioned her intelligence, her education, her right to exist in your presence, and you did it all while she maintained more class and professionalism than you've shown in your entire life." His words triggered a wave of agreement throughout the restaurant. Diners began standing, some approaching to offer their support to Cleo and Miguel. An elderly gentleman from the corner booth made his way over, his blue jacket marking him as someone of Miguel's generation who understood struggle. "Young lady," he addressed Cleo warmly, "I've been coming to this restaurant for 15 years, and your father has always run an establishment based on respect and excellence. If you're anything like him, this place will continue to thrive long after people like her are forgotten." Constance Fairfax approached with her notebook ready, her professional demeanor barely containing her excitement about the story unfolding before her. "Miss Navarro, I'm Constance Fairfax from Metropolitan Dining Magazine. Would you be willing to share your experience working incognito in your family's restaurant? I believe our readers would be fascinated by your perspective on learning business from the ground up." Cleo nodded, grateful for the opportunity to redirect the energy in the room towards something positive. "I wanted to understand every aspect of this business before taking on leadership responsibilities. Working as a server taught me that the heart of hospitality lies in treating every person with dignity, regardless of their position or background." As Constance scribbled notes, Charles Wyndham's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. His face grew paler with each message as colleagues, classmates, and business contacts reached out to express their horror at his recorded behavior. Several professional organizations had already begun investigating his membership status. "This is insane," Charles muttered, scrolling through hundreds of negative comments. "People are posting this everywhere. My company's HR department just called an emergency meeting." Natalia Vega approached from the hostess station, her professional composure intact despite the emotional toll of witnessing the harassment. "Mr. Miguel, I've documented everything from the beginning, including timestamps and witness contact information. Several customers have volunteered to provide statements if needed." Miguel placed his arm around his daughter's shoulders, pride evident in his expression despite the circumstances that had led to this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the dining room, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built success through integrity, "I want to thank you for your support today. This restaurant has always been a place where people from all backgrounds can enjoy excellent food in an atmosphere of mutual respect." The dining room erupted in spontaneous applause, with customers rising from their seats to show their approval. The sound echoed off the walls under the bright fluorescent lighting, creating a stark contrast to the ugly scene that had unfolded earlier. "Cleo has spent months working in every position here, from prep cook to server to host. because she believes that true leadership requires understanding every aspect of the operation. Today, unfortunately, she also learned about the discrimination that our staff sometimes faces from customers who mistake cruelty for superiority. Beatrice Wyndham made one final desperate attempt to salvage her position. This is all very touching, but you can't seriously expect to ban paying customers based on one misunderstanding. Our family has spent thousands of dollars here over the years. Isabella Moreno emerged from the kitchen carrying a beautifully plated dish, her chef's coat spotless despite the busy lunch service. She had witnessed the entire confrontation from the kitchen window and could no longer remain silent. "Mrs. Wyndham," she said with quiet intensity, "I've worked alongside this family for 8 years. Miguel taught me that money spent with hatred is worth less than nothing. Your thousands of dollars came with a cost too high for any decent establishment to accept." The sight of Isabella's solidarity brought tears to Cleo's eyes as she realized how many people had been silently supporting her throughout the ordeal. The restaurant truly was a family, bound not by blood, but by shared values of respect and dignity. Richard Wyndham tugged at his wife's arm, recognizing that every word they spoke was digging their hole deeper. "Beatrice, we need to leave. This isn't helping our situation." But Beatrice couldn't resist one final threat, her red dress now seeming garish under the unforgiving lighting. "This isn't over. I have friends in the health department, the licensing bureau, the city council. You'll regret the day you decided to humiliate the Wyndham family." Her words hung in the air like toxic smoke, until Raymond Jackson's voice cut through them with crystalline clarity. "Ma'am, the only people humiliated today are the ones who chose to behave with such cruelty toward an innocent person. That humiliation belongs entirely to you." As the Wyndham family finally began their walk of shame toward the exit, customers openly expressed their disapproval. Some shook their heads in disgust, while others made comments about the family's behavior loud enough to ensure they heard every word of condemnation. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows seemed to brighten as their toxic presence left the building, illuminating the faces of customers and staff who had witnessed something remarkable, not just the revelation of Cleo's identity, but the power of a community standing together against hatred and discrimination. Miguel addressed the room once more, his voice filled with emotion. "Today reminded me why I love this business, not just for the food we serve, but for the connections we build and the values we uphold together." Constance Fairfax continued her interview with Cleo, asking insightful questions about her experience and the lessons she had learned. "What will you take from this experience into your future leadership role?" Cleo considered the question carefully, looking around at the faces of the people who had supported her through the worst harassment of her life. "I learned that true character reveals itself under pressure, both in those who choose cruelty and those who choose compassion. As I take on more responsibility here, I want to ensure that every employee knows they have the full support of management when they face discrimination or abuse." Isabella Moreno presented her special celebration meal, a dish that represented the fusion of cultures and backgrounds that made the restaurant special. As the staff gathered around to share the moment, the sense of family and solidarity was palpable under the bright dining room lights. The story of what happened that day would spread far beyond the restaurant's walls, carried by social media posts, word of mouth, and eventually Constance's featured article. Charles Wyndham's career prospects dimmed as the viral video followed him across professional networks. Beatrice Wyndham found her social standing significantly diminished as friends and acquaintances distanced themselves from her toxic behavior. But inside the restaurant, as the afternoon light painted everything golden, Cleo Navarro stood surrounded by people who had proven that dignity, respect, and solidarity could triumph over hatred and prejudice. She had learned invaluable lessons about business, about humanity, and about the responsibility that came with power and privilege. The fluorescent lights and natural skylight illuminated not just a dining room, but a community that had chosen to stand together against injustice. And in that light, Cleo saw her future as both a business leader and a champion for treating every person with the dignity they deserved, regardless of their position or background. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.